Mostly be in a nice house, have a good paycheck coming in every once or twice a week, and should be good there.
That's awesome. Thank you, Mitchell.
Thank you for having me.
Today I'm here with,
Renee.
and I'm going to ask Renee a few questions on how she saves money while being a student. So, first question, how do you save money?
I never leave my house. Step one.
I'm gonna skip that. So, if what are some major expenses do you have weekly being a student?
Probably groceries, utilities, that sort of stuff, transportation, gas.
That's a big one these days, eh? So, Renee, hypothetically, if you were given $500,000, what would you do with it?
I would either set it aside for a down payment on a house eventually, or I would use it to fund the startup of my career.
What's your career?
So I'm in radio broadcasting, which means I'm on the radio and I'm getting into freelance voice work. So I need a good home computer to do that and some other solid equipment. So it seems like a good investment for my money.
Yeah, no, a nice studio would be really nice.
Yes, you got to spend money to make it.
Yeah, obviously. Now, where do you see yourself financially in 10 years?
As long as I'm financially independent and self-sufficient, I'll be happy.
Simple. Keep it as. Thanks, Renee.
Yeah, really shooting for the stars.
Money, money, money. Now imagine what you could do if you had just a little more money. Have you ever started the month feeling like a budgeting superstar, only to check your account halfway through and wonder, where did it all go? Don't worry, you're not alone. Whether it's unexpected bills, overspending, or that irresistible late-night online shopping spree, staying on top of your finances can feel like a juggling act. But what if I told you there's a way to take control, eliminate debt, and even build a pathway to financial independence? That's where our first guest comes in. Joining us today is Olaf Bell, an entrepreneur, coach, and mentor who's made his mission to help families break free from debt, create smart budgets, and take charge of their financial futures. He is part of Primerica, one of the world's leading insurance companies, and is here to share practical tips and strategies to help you achieve financial stability in 2025. Olaf, it's great to have you in the studio. Good to have you on the show. And let's dive right in. I mean, budgeting, money, financing, these are words that we hear about a lot, but maybe we don't clearly understand it in reality. So could you help us break it down? What really is financial budgeting?
Yeah, so financial budgeting is about having a proper plan in place and keeping the plan. So those are the basic steps when it comes to budgeting. We have some guidance when it comes to budgeting. First, you need to set a goal, which is the most important component, and then it's about following through with these goals that you have set and achieve it. So
that's a good start. Thank you very much. And now, so what's the best way to set and achieve financial goals? You know, some people want to save up for maybe higher education. They want to save up to buy a car. They want to buy a house. You know, we know what we want, but how do we step by step go through planning to ensure that we're able to achieve those set goals?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So the first and most important component is that we actually put a list together, make a plan, what are the different goals that we want to achieve, as there are a lot of different goals that are individually competing usually. So make that. The next important step is to make it personalized. So really understand what is it what you want. So if you want to save for a car, you need to know what kind of car, what model it is, what price it is, so have all the details together that we then can go and prioritize our list. And from there, we basically go and make a timeline when we aiming for those in areas. And I always use the example of a GPS, right? So if you go somewhere for a trip, you need to have the destination first, right? If you don't have a destination with the street and country and the exact location, any GPS is useless. And same as it with any budgeting, any financial advice, have that goal set very precise, and then use the GPS, punch the address in, and the GPS guides you step by step to where you want to be. So that's another analogy on how we can go in that direction. So
Okay,
that would be
awesome.
good.
Awesome. So let's look at students, because we're majorly here for the students, and you know that some of them are not even working right now. But we will always say, you have to save, you have to plan for the future. And I don't know, from my own, myopic point of view, I think it's important because you don't want to be on the same point or at the same point you were last year financially. So no matter where you are right now, you have to start building and planning towards a more stable financial life. So my question to you now is, what are the strategies students can employ or implement, even though there's a tight budget? What can they start? What are those baby steps they can start taking right now to start saving, so that the long-term goal would be for them to achieve financial stability?
Yeah.
Or liberty, in fact.
Well, that's all of our goals, right? So hopefully be financially independent one
Yeah,
day.
yeah.
But yeah, it starts always with these small amounts. And in order to get a bigger goal, it's little steps that you have to implement step by step in order to get to your goal where you want to be. And one of the things is definitely the control over your personal finances. That's, for me, the critical point for every young person. Starting having control about your money. Don't go and waste and spend money where you don't want it. So having little small steps is very important, and looking out for the right vehicle to save your money. And I have a slide there. I don't know if you can show it, the first one maybe.
Okay.
The important component is that you always make sure you know what the interest rate is, because there is what we call the power of compound interest. And you can see on an example here, it's maybe not for students, for anyone else, but it applies also for students. In our example, if you save $200 on a monthly basis for 30 years in this example, with 3%, it would grow to $162,000. If you get 6%, it would grow to $327,000. But if you get 9% interest, the same $200 that you save on a monthly basis will actually grow to $700,000. So knowing those little things is very, very important. So we all talk about financial literacy. That's part of financial literacy, where we can learn the right little tips and tricks to actually go to a long distance when it comes to saving. So now, what applies for students is saving the $25 on a monthly basis or per paycheck. And another tool that we use and apply in this case is pay yourself first. It may sound a little bit weird, but what it actually means, instead of paying all your other bills you have to pay, and you may want to start with your first paycheck.
Can I interject quickly? Paying myself first, and I want to go get a bucket of ice cream, or I want to get a new shirt in my wardrobe or something, right?
That's not paying yourself, it's spending for others, right? You pay the ice cream man, you pay the other people. So putting the money from your paycheck into your savings in one bucket for, I don't know, another car or for the tuition for the next month, those are little steps that you have available, and yeah, you pay yourself first versus everybody else.
Okay, so I know you're an immigrant to Canada, right? For a long time, you've been here though. So what are those financial challenges that immigrants often face when they come into Canada?
Yeah, so the biggest challenge is that the financial education that people have from back home is not really the same way that people live in Canada. So
absolutely,
we're coming in and seeing all the items we can buy and all the adventures we can do and all the food we can eat leads us very, very quick to spending much, much more than we're supposed to. And I recommend for all immigrants, stick to what you have learned back home, because everybody learned about saving, everybody learned about long-term saving up for retirements. Those are values that are still applicable here. It's just often taken away by credit cards, by spendings, by activities that you do out there. And very often we see that the month is longer than the money we have, right? So that's a big challenge that we all have.
And you know, that was my biggest financial challenge when I came in here, because back home in Nigeria, I buy what I own what I buy. In other words, there was never opportunity for me to go and buy something and pay over time.
Yeah.
Once I make the purchase, I own it. That was my culture then. But now we have credit cards, and we're advised to use credit cards so we can build credit history to make better purchases and build financial credibility. So please educate us a bit about the difference between debit cards and credit cards and the pros and cons.
Yes, and that's a very good point that you brought up here, because in Canada, credit cards are basically given to anyone who just shows up in the country, anyone who shows up at the bank. And yes, the banks encourage us to spend more money, and we should be able to control our money. The main difference between the credit card and the debit card is the debit card allows you to spend only money you actually have. So money that's in your account, money that's available for you, versus the credit card, which allows you to spend a certain amount and you pay it later. And that's where we need to be very careful, because we should not spend money we don't have. And the other component is the credit card pays or charges you interest that's renewed basically on a monthly basis. And that's the credit card trap that we all talk about. Once you have that debt on your credit card, it's really hard to pay it off and get rid of it. So very important, the credit card debt needs to be tackled right away. If you use the credit card, make sure you can pay it off at the end of the month.
Amazing. Amazing. So now we know that many people are actually living from paycheck to paycheck. I mean, there's a high rise of there's inflation, and the economy is still a thing that most of us are grappling with. Economic recession. We haven't fully recovered. I mean, economies all over the world haven't fully recovered from economic recession, but we still need to save up for at least emergency funds. So what might be a good amount to save up if you're, let's be very practical here. Let's maybe look for an amount of money we can probably work on. I know that some people earn between $24,000 to $28,000 a year. Yeah. So if that's how much you earn, how much can you possibly save up as emergency funds so that you have them to fall back on when the need arises?
So for us, the guideline is you should have 2 to 3 monthly incomes saved as an emergency fund. And the main reason is because...
But how practical is that?
Well, you're not supposed to do it in one chunk. If you could, that would be perfect. But if not, then you don't, right? So the idea is really that even if the emergency fund is something you build up over a time, over a while. So if you start with, again, my $25 or my $50 on a monthly or on a paycheck basis, you save up that money. Or if you budget early on and you start working and then you go studying afterwards, you may have some money that you can set aside, which is your emergency fund that you keep. Don't spend everything as soon as you start. And small little steps, again, gets you to that budget. You just have to be focused on it. And from my perspective, I would set up a separate saving account or whatever, even an investment account, where you put in these small amounts that will then sit there for you as a backup plan for the time you need it.
Okay, so let's talk about budgeting. And thankfully, technology has really made it a lot more easier to track how much you're saving, how you're saving, and then you can watch your money grow time after time. Could you tell us about some budgeting tools and how we can really stay disciplined while budgeting?
Yeah, that's actually a good one. I'm an older folks and I'm an Excel guy, so I track my money on an Excel sheet, which is not necessary for the younger generations. There are a lot of budgeted tools out there that people can use, apps they can use on their phone. For me, the recommendation would be just go and try a few of those, because I think it's more important you feel comfortable with it, you feel okay with using it, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how fancy it is, what matters is that you use it. So any small tool helping budgeting, even if you have a basic sheet at the month's beginning and say, hey, these are my fixed expenses, plus these are my money that I have available for whatever, going out for food or for entertainment, as long as you have the amounts, that's more important. So go and find the tool that works for you.
Okay, that's good. So now, Olaf, we're going to play a quick game, and it's called Budget Busters or Boosters. I'm going to be reading out a few questions, and then you will tell me which is more appropriate. Is it a budget buster or a budget booster? And so it's a rapid fire question. Are you ready to play?
Yes.
Okay, let's do it. So, skipping your morning coffee runs and brewing at home.
Brewing at home is definitely a budget booster.
Okay, because you're saving up on. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, because it's just cheaper and you don't spend additional amounts besides the coffee when you go out. Usually what happens, right? You grab a cookie or donut or whatever that may be. So doing it at home is definitely the better choice.
Okay, guys, I hope you're listening. All right, buying groceries without a shopping list.
That's a very bad one. That's definitely a buster, because you need to have a list what you need. That's important. Otherwise, especially if you're hungry, you go and buy items that you don't necessarily need and that you don't have on your list.
That's a good one, especially for women, I'm just saying.
true.
Okay, using cashback credits cards responsibly.
Yeah, so credit cards, if you use them responsibly, it's a good thing to do because you have your spendings over the months, you pay it off at the end of the month. So it could be a budget booster if you are okay with controlling what you're spending.
Okay. Impulse buying that new gadget on sale. It's Black Friday sales, you know.
That's definitely a budget buster because usually those sales are done in the moment. They are done out of emotions, and we should always avoid those spendings out of emotion. So I give my kids a guideline. Hey, if you spend $10, I give it 2 minutes to think about. If you spend $100, give it 15 minutes. Anything bigger than that, you should think at least a day or wait for the next day. So usually the emotion comes down and you are more rational in buying the right items.
Awesome. Now, setting up automatic transfers to a savings account.
Yeah, that's a budget booster, and that's priority number one. Something you need to have in place. And not only one saving account according to whatever you want to save, create multiple saving accounts.
Amazing. Now, borrowing money from friends instead of creating an emergency fund.
Yeah, that's a very big one. That's definitely a buster because you are in debt with somebody else, which is never good and often struggles or gives negative connotations to any relationships and friendships. Emergency fund is the way to go.
Okay. Now, meal prepping for the week instead of ordering takeout. Once in a while, though.
Yep, if it's in your budget, that's okay. That's definitely a booster. And my recommendation, yeah, have a food plan, have a plan in place, have the food even cooked up front. Especially if you're on a tight budget, then that's the best way to control because spending food for lunch, going out after lunch or grabbing food on the go is much, much more expensive and it leads to other spendings on the side. Having a meal plan, perfect.
Awesome. Now, the final one, sign up for multiple subscription services you barely use.
Yeah, that's definitely a buster. Controlling subscription, I think that's one of the biggest challenges the younger generation has to face.
They make us do it. They make us do it. You have to pay for your Microsoft.
I get it.
You have to pay for Canva. Like, you just have to be in. I mean, these are tools that we have to use. And then before you know it, you're paying for 5 subscriptions in 1 month.
Do a regular review. Is it really something that I need all the time? Did I really use it? That's something you definitely have to make sure you do that regularly because money floats out of the pocket faster than we want.
Sound advice. So, well, Olaf, you've just helped us bust some bad habits and boost our budgets all in 2 minutes. Thanks for playing along. We'll continue our conversations now and very quickly too because we will take the other guests shortly. And so my next question to you is, now we've spoken about budgeting. Now now let's talk about how we can go on to manage loans. If for any reason you're owing on your credit cards or you borrowed from a friend or however a loan, right?
Yeah.
How can we create a workable plan to pay back those loans and free ourselves?
Yeah. So it all starts again with taking the loan and having an exact plan on how you want to pay it off, right? Just leaving it and waiting for the day I hopefully get money or make money is not a good choice. It's more important to know, hey, I got to put $100 in my loan every paycheck, or I got to put $50 in my loan regularly. So having that right from the beginning is very, very important. And for me, it's even a step ahead. When you start thinking about studying and stuff like that, you need to have a financial plan in place before you even start. So you know exactly, I have one loan that lasts me for whatever I need, and I don't have to go and find another loan because I'm spending more money than I'm making. And making extra money, I mean, everybody talks making extra money.
Yes, this is the hustle culture. You have to have multiple streams of income.
Yes, that's
sure.
Definitely a goal these days. Most people don't want to rely on just one income. Side hustle, side jobs, small side jobs on the side are important.
for sure. Okay, now what about the cost of living? It's something I want to revisit because I know that this is most people's realities. We're still trying to see that. In Kingston, for instance, the councillor that declared a state of emergency because 1/3 of the population cannot afford groceries anymore. So it's seeming like this is a message that is so real for us, and I want us to drive it home. How can people in the nick of grappling financial challenges create space to manage cost of transportation, groceries, savings, education, etc.?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge in the recent years with increased prices and with not so increased incomes. So from my perspective, it comes back to the same approach. You need to plan properly and you need to be aware, really be aware of where you spend your money. So my first approach to people is often, hey, sit down and write down where did you actually spend your money last week, last month. And people will see there are parts in between. The coffee at Starbucks, right? It doesn't have to be Starbucks, can somebody else. Or like grab a burger on my way, or whatever those items are. These are the little things that are easy floating out of our pockets, but for the long run, those are the ones that are actually holding us back from putting a proper budget together and living our budget. So having that budget it's very important. Controlling your money is very important. And from the other hand, I think it would be good if somebody has a accountable partner, somebody who holds them accountable, who checks in with them regularly. Hey,
that's where financial advice is coming, right?
Yeah, it could be a financial advisor, or on a student level, it could be just a friend, somebody who you talk to and you have the same goals. But somebody who is really following up on you, what you're doing and how you're spending your money.
That's a good one. I'm going to get my own accountability buddy. Okay, my final question to you is credit scores. It's a big concern here in Canada. Not a concern, it's a big tradition here. You have to have credit score before you can even, attain certain financial status here in Canada. Yeah. You can buy a house with a credit score, and even rent a house, you need a credit score as well. Sure. So how can one intentionally build, a good credit score?
Yeah, that's a very good point. For anyone coming into the country, you have to think about this because the credit score exists behind the scene, right? We don't see it, we don't have it in front of our faces, and most people don't really know how is it created behind the scene. Very important components is, yes, you should have a credit card because that's the one item that builds up your credit score. But again, you need to make sure once you use it, you pay it off at the end of the month. So don't leave your credit on the card and you have to pay interest. If you pay interest, then please pay it. Other areas are paying bills in time. Those are important components. And don't get too many credit cards, because switching a credit card or not using a credit card, canceling a credit card, these are all criteria that goes negative to your credit score. So get one, keep one, and use it the right way.
Wait, I'm so curious. I'm going to ask again. You said we should cancel a credit card will impact our credit score?
Correct. So that's why you should only get one and keep it, and just don't mix and match with credit
I never knew that. Because I just cancel out one of my credit cards. I'm like, why do I have two already? So
yeah, I mean, for you to control it, it's a better option, obviously.
Yeah.
But for thinking about using multiple credit cards, just avoid getting new credit cards. Just stick with one and use it.
Wow, thank you so much for the great insights. Olaf, it's been great speaking with you, and thank you again for being here in the studio with us. We have heard it. We must be intentional with how we're spending, what we're spending on, so we can build financial independence. Okay, we'll have a second guest shortly, but first we have a video we want to play for you. We want to show you something. Stay tuned. We will be right back.
Today, we're diving into essential tips to help you budget for the new year. Do you ever feel like you're constantly counting down the days until your next paycheck? You're not alone. Many students face the same struggles, but it doesn't have to be this way. The new year is a time for fresh starts, including your finances. So, if you're ready to break free from financial stress and start building a solid foundation for your future, keep watching. Let's get real for a moment. Before we can talk about budgeting, we need to know where your money is going right now. Grab those bank statements, those credit card bills, and track every single dollar. Factor in everything: part-time jobs, financial aid, money from family, it all counts. Be honest with yourself about expenses. Those daily coffees and impulse buys add up. Once you have a clear picture of your cash flow, you can start setting some goals. Remember, your goals should be smart, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Now that you know where your money's going, it's time to create a budget that works for you. Start by breaking down your spending into categories like housing, food, transportation, and entertainment. Be realistic about how much you need to allocate to each category. There are tons of budgeting apps and spreadsheets out there, or you can do it the old-fashioned way with a pen and paper. The most important thing is to find a system that you'll actually use. And remember, a budget isn't set in stone. Be flexible and adjust as needed. Chapter 3. Tips for saving. Saving money might seem impossible on a student budget, but it can be done.
First and foremost, make saving automatic. Set up a separate savings account and schedule regular transfers from your checking account.
Even if it's just a small amount each month, it will add up over time.
Look for areas where you can cut back without feeling deprived. Can you cook at home more often? Can you walk or bike to class instead of taking an Uber?
And don't forget to negotiate. You can often get better deals on things like your cell phone bill or internet service just by asking.
Being a savvy consumer is key. Chapter 4. Student loans and financial aid. Student loans are a fact of life for many of us, but it's crucial to understand the terms of your loans and to borrow responsibly.
Before you take out any loans, explore all your financial aid options. Fill out the FAFSA, apply for scholarships, and ask for help from your financial aid office.
Once you have your loans, make sure you understand the repayment terms. What's the interest rate? When do you have to start making payments? Are there any loan forgiveness programs you might be eligible for?
If you're struggling to make your loan payments, contact your loan servicer and explore options like income-driven repayment plans or deferment.
Knowledge is power. Chapter 5. What other students are saying. Now I want to hear from you. Let's see what other students are saying about their saving habits and tips.
What's your number one saving tip?
What's your biggest financial challenge?
What advice would you give your younger self about money?
It's all about finding what works for you and your unique circumstances. Don't be afraid to experiment and learn from your mistakes. Thanks for watching. Remember, taking control of your finances is a journey, not a destination. So take what you've learned today and start implementing it into your own life. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's how we learn and grow. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more financial tips and advice. See you next time.
Good luck today.
Thanks, man.
How I'm loving life these days. I see it falling into place. It's coming together. I don't even need to chase it. You see it written on my face. It's the right time, right place. How I'm loving life these days. It's the right time, right place. How I'm loving life these days.
Well, it's good to have you back. Let's talk about a topic that's on the mind of so many students, student loans. Now, if you've ever felt overwhelmed by the thought of applying for financial aid or unsure about how to navigate the process, you are not alone. For many students, loans can feel like a maze with no clear exit, but here's the thing. Understanding how to access the right financial resources can make all the difference between stressing over tuition and focusing on your studies. So whether you're wondering about eligibility, the application process, or how to borrow wisely, today's guest is here to clear the fog. Joining us today in the studio is Lindsay Wilson, the Associate Registrar of Student Financial Services at Conestoga College. With her wealth of experience, she's helped countless students like you secure the funding they need to chase their dreams without financial fear of holding them back. It's good to have you in the studio. I'm so glad because this is really on short notice. Well, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So let's dive right in. So what are the first steps? A student needs to get some financial support, needs to get a loan for tuition. What is the first thing they need to do?
Absolutely. So if a student is at the early stages of thinking about their post-secondary journey, coming to college, what they really want to start thinking about is what the overall cost is going to be for them. And if they're thinking about taking out student loans through OSAP, there are some really great resources on the OSAP website to help them get started. So for example, there is an estimator available on the OSAP website for students before you even start an application. You can enter some basic details about your program, your institution, and your financial situation, and it will give you an estimate of how much funding you might be eligible for.
That's amazing. So what's the difference between provincial and federal student loans?
Yeah, so there's actually a couple of different things to talk about in that with regard to what OSAP is made up of. So OSAP funding is made up of, as you said, federal and provincial loans, but there's also grant portions from both the federal and provincial governments. So the main sort of differentiation between all of those things is that the grant portion of the funding that students are eligible for is essentially free money. So it's funding that you don't need to pay back. It's a grant that goes to you to allow you to take some of that funding for your studies that is just there to help you, and provided you are progressing through your program and you're successful, you won't have to pay back that funding. So that's a portion of the funding. The other portion are the loans. So the main difference between the federal loans and provincial loans are the interest rate that's charged on them. So everything is assessed at the same time. When you apply for OSAP, students will end up in a position where their grants and loans are assessed at the same time. But once you enter that repayment period after you leave your studies, you complete your studies, the federal loans are interest-free forever. So the federal government a couple of years ago decided that they won't be charging loans on that portion of the OSAP funding, but the provincial loans are still subject to interest. And the interest rate for students is prime plus 1%, so it will vary depending on when you go into repayment and how much you have left on your loans.
Oh, so it fluctuates from year, is it yearly, or what are the factors for fluctuations?
Yeah, so it's based on the Bank of Canada prime rate. So, whenever we hear those announcements that they've lowered the interest rates, that will have an impact on the loans that students have for OSAP.
Oh, interesting. Good conversation here. Okay, can we talk about eligibility? So I would, for instance, if I want to take a student loan, what factors or requirements do I need to provide or do I need to meet to qualify for a federal or a provincial loan?
Yeah, absolutely. So for OSAP, when we're looking at student eligibility, there's a few key components. So the first is your status in Canada. So OSAP is available to students who are Canadian citizens, permanent residents, or protected persons. So that essentially sometimes students will refer to themselves as refugee status students. Any of those three statuses can potentially be eligible for OSAP. The other component to the OSAP eligibility is residency. So there is a requirement that you are a resident of Ontario.
Okay.
That can vary depending on how long a student has been in Canada. So if you've lived in Canada for more than 12 months without attending any post-secondary studies, you're considered to be a resident of Ontario. For students who might be new to Canada, if Ontario is the province which you have lived in since you've arrived, for example, and it's been less than 12 months, you can still potentially qualify for OSAP. But all of that is assessed as part of that application process.
Okay. What then are the common mistakes that students make when putting in the application?
I would say it's not necessarily a mistake, but it's a timing issue, is that you want to apply as early as possible. OSAP applications take about 6 to 8 weeks to process, especially if it's your first time. It can be on the longer end of that because there are a lot of checks that happen with that application. The OSAP application is also linked to students' previous year's income tax information, as well as those of their contributing family members. So what that means is that students who are considered dependent, so if you've been out of high school for less than 4 years, you'd have to provide your parents' information, whereas if you're a married student, you'd have to provide information as well for your spouse. So you need to make sure you sort of have that all in order when you get ready to apply, but you can apply as early as possible. That will set you up for success and make sure that your funding is in place for when you begin your studies.
Okay, thank you. I'm just wondering now if there are other financial aids available to Conestoga students besides the OSAP funding, the bursaries, or just tell us about those.
Absolutely. So Conestoga has a very generous awards and scholarships program. We have what is called a general awards application that's available to students, and it is available every term that students are enrolled, so it's available fall, winter, and spring. Students are encouraged to apply every term. It's open for 6 weeks, and it's a single application. What that application does is it allows students to be considered for any award, scholarship, or bursary that is available in that term. And it's a fairly straightforward application. It will will ask students to provide information about some of their basic personal details. In some instances, there may be some financial questions that we ask for, but the key there is really, there's 2 questions that we really want to encourage students to fill out, and that's your goal sections. So a lot of awards and scholarships might be looking for students who meet certain criteria. What are your goals and your aspirations? What program are you in? And those are sections where you might have to type out a little bit of detail about yourself, but those can really go a long way in helping a student be considered for a potential award, scholarship, or bursary.
Okay, and those are the places where you need to really show that you are worthy of the scholarship. Like, do you also have to defend your academic performances while you're applying, or it doesn't really matter? You don't have to be an A-list student to apply. Just anyone can apply.
Anyone can apply. Excuse me. Domestic students or international students can apply. You don't need to be an A+ student to apply because, as well as I mentioned, it assesses students for bursaries, which are based strictly on financial need. So regardless of your grades, if you're enrolled in school, the goal is, we see that you have financial need. We're going to try and provide you with some additional funding to help support you.
Okay, so how can students find the scholarship opportunities, as per their programs? Or is it cut across different programs, or it's specific to each program that they're registered in?
A really great place to look is really on the financial aid website on Conestoga. So there is an awards directory there where students can look up based on program what awards might be available to them. But that one application is the source for all of them. So it'll give you details about what's available, but if you're interested in applying for any of them, that one application is the place to do it.
Fantastic. Now, what about repayment options or relief programs available to students after graduation?
Yeah. So in terms of repayment for students who take OSAP funding, a couple of key points to know are that while students are in studies, any loans that you take out are interest-free, as well as you don't have to make any repayments. Once you leave studies, you complete your program, your interest will begin to accrue once you leave your program, but you don't need to start making payments for 6 months. So there's that 6-month repayment grace period. And essentially that time is meant to allow students the opportunity to find a job, get on their feet after they complete their studies. After that 6-month period, if, for example, a student, you're having a hard time finding a job, you're not able to make the payments, there are repayment assistance programs available to students through the National Student Loan Service Center. It's the NSLSC for short, and that is essentially the bank that administers the loans for the students. And that repayment assistance program is available to students at any time, or former students at any time. And what it will do is it will allow you another 6-month grace period for the payments. So it will just delay when you need to make the payments, but the key there is to know that the interest will continue to add up while you're on that repayment assistance program. The other thing that I think is good to know is that you do have, during that grace period, you will get a lot of communications from the NSLSC about what your overall loan balance is, what the payments are, and how you can negotiate those payment terms with the NSLSC before you reach that 6-month mark.
I'm glad you mentioned this, because I was going to ask you, how can students estimate, their loan interest and how to calculate it? But can they calculate by themselves, or you just send them, is the percentage that is applied per month, or how is it done?
If you want to do a pre-assessment for yourself and you're a little bit savvy with the numbers, you can go on the OSAP website, and there is a repayment calculator for students. The other thing that you can do is, if you log in through the NSLSC website, once you are in the program and you have received loans, they will give you a running balance of what your loan total is. And then, as I mentioned, mentioned, 6 months, when you leave your program, you'll be contacted by the NSLSC and they will start to set up those terms for you in terms of the length of your repayment and what your monthly payments will look like.
Okay, so what are effective strategies or ways for students to plan their loan monies and ensure that it lasts through the semester?
Yeah, so I think that some of that goes back to sort of general budgeting and prioritizing what you're spending your money on. Something that I always advise students of is there are a lot of really great budgeting tools online that are free. You can Google like student budget template and you'll be able to find some good tools that way. The other thing that I always mention to students is make sure when you do your budget, write down all of your expenses. Sometimes we think that, oh, I'm not going to include like shampoo and stuff like that because I need that anyway, but it all adds up, right? So you want to make sure you include all of your expenses. And if you don't really have a good sense of what your overall, day-to-day living costs are, take 2 weeks and write down everything you spend, because you might surprise yourself to see, oh, I spend more on lunches than I thought I did. So that can help you in terms of, the overall budgeting for it. And if you're able to, when you're applying early for OSAP, once you get to a point, before you've even begun your studies, you'll get that estimate, and then you can take that estimate and pop it into that budget calculator to help you figure out where you're going to land.
Okay, so what about students who have part-time jobs and then other opportunities for students to even work during school so that they can pay back these loans?
Yeah, absolutely. So a common question that we get from students is, can I work while I'm taking OSAP? And absolutely you can. Okay, students can work, earn up to $5,200 per term, and it won't have an impact on their OSAP assessment. So part-time work is a great way to supplement the funds that you need. And at Conestoga as well, we do have the Conestoga College Work Study Program, which is available for students to work on campus. It's a really great opportunity in terms of getting practical experience while you're in studies. Another benefit is, of course, that as a student who's working for the college, your supervisor or manager knows that school comes first, because that's what we're here for at the end of the day. And if a student is interested in exploring those opportunities, they're usually posted about the month before the start of the upcoming term. So that would be the best time to look for on-campus work.
Okay, so it sounds interesting and might be tempting for some students. So just to clear the air very quickly, how can a student strike a balance between borrowing what's enough and excessive debt?
Yeah, for sure. One thing to know with the OSAP program is that students are assessed based on their own unique circumstances. So I had mentioned earlier that parental income might be factored in versus spousal income if you're married. But what that does is it allows you to you'd be assessed for what you need. Also, for example, if students have children, that would be factored into the assessment as well. I mentioned earlier about the difference between the grants and the loans for students. There is an option for students, if you're wary of taking out too much funding, to take only the loan portion, only the grant portion, of the funding that you're eligible for. And you can start there, and if later on in the academic year you realize, you know what, I do need more funding, my part-time job and the grants aren't quite enough, you can still request that later on in the term if you want to try to give that a go and try to hold off taking out some of the loans. But really being mindful of your spending, your budgeting, and trying to plan ahead is helpful.
So I know you mentioned earlier that for international students, they can take advantage of Conestoga's, is it called bursary or awards? What is it called again?
It's the General Awards application.
Okay, okay. And can you just walk us through how that application goes?
Yeah, for sure. So students it should take about 30 minutes for a student to complete. It will open 2 weeks before the start of each term, and it's available through the end of the first month. So the Winter Awards application is still open now until the end of the day next Friday.
Statements as well as if you're a student. I mean, if you're students with parents, you have to provide your parents. You have to provide your parents' information as well. For those who don't have parents or those who are not married, are there tailored, financial options for them, especially those who have disabilities?
Absolutely. So students who are not married and they've aged out of that dependent status with their parents, they're considered independent students. So their assessment would be based entirely on their own individual income in the previous tax year. For students with disabilities, for example, though, students are able to identify themselves with the OSAP program as having a disability, and there's a couple of reasons a student might want to do that. So on one hand, there is an additional grant for students with disabilities, and that funding is intended to help support students where they might have additional costs for specialized travel to campus, software, those types of things. So that grant is available as part of the OSAP assessment. All students need to do is fill out that declaration of their disability. They will have to provide some medical documentation, but it will allow them to be considered for that grant. In addition, if a student has a disability and that requires them to take a reduced course load because for whatever reason, students are able to take that reduced course load and still qualify for full-time funding, even if they're technically at a part-time course load, because their disability necessitates that. So there are things that students can do in that case to help that we can help you navigate and support. The final piece is that students who qualify for OSAP who have a disability, there is also a special bursary program that we work with the Accessible Learning Office on, called the Bursary for Students with Disabilities. So that goes above and beyond the grant that students are qualified for, that will allow, again, for specialized equipment or services that might be required for students to fully participate in their studies because of their disability.
Thank you for the eye-opening insights you've shared today, Lindsay. I'm truly grateful. But before I let you go, please, can you share one piece of advice for students who may need loans but are hesitant to take it?
What I would say is that really thinking about going into post-secondary studies is a big decision, and it is a big financial investment. But really it's a matter of thinking about it in the context of investing in yourself, because students are coming to college in order to improve their opportunities after the fact and improve their potential career or earnings and those sorts of things. So really, I think the key thing is to think about it as an investment in yourself. If it's something that you're nervous about, take some time to do those budgeting pieces, and also consider taking just the grant portion if that's something that's really concerning to you. But at the end of the day, it is a really positive investment for students to help further their opportunities once they complete their studies.
Brilliant. And thank you so much again. It's been great speaking to Lindsay Wilson, our Associate Registrar here at Conestoga with the Students on Financial Services. And that brings us to the end of this episode of Your Conestoga Today. A huge thank you again to Olaf Bell and, of course, to you for sharing practical tips on smart budgeting and financial independence, and for breaking down the student loan process and showing us how to access the financial resources we need to succeed. Now, remember, financial stability doesn't happen overnight, but with the right tools, guidance, and mindset, you can take charge of your future. So if your plan is to create a budget, tackling debt, or securing the funding to pursue your dreams, every small step you take does count. As you head into this week, ask yourself, what's one financial habit you can start today to make a difference tomorrow? Thank you, Conestoga, for tuning in today and spending your time with us. Don't forget to follow us on social media. By the way, I found this with one of my colleagues here. It's really nice. One of our flyers or stickers to remind you to follow us on social media. So if you find this around the college, pick one and show to your friends. Share with your friends and colleagues as well. And so till next time, remember, Conestoga, stay inspired, stay focused, and as always, take good care of yourselves and your wallets. I am Mama Zawunkar, your host. It's been great being here today. Have a good day. Bye-bye.